Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a comedy drama film, The Hudsucker Proxy. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with a fresh graduate arriving in New York City to look for a job. He peruses the job board for employment opportunities, but discovers that all the good business jobs require previous employment experience. He walks away dejected. During a board meeting, the founder of a large corporation gets distracted by the large window in front of him. He stares at it ominously, then removes his pocket watch. He winds it and leaves it on the table as he stands up. The graduate goes inside a diner to get coffee. His coffee cup leaves a ring stain around a newspaper advert for a job as a mailroom clerk at the same corporation. He exits the diner. The founder takes one last whiff of his cigar, then starts to walk toward the window. A wind blows the newspaper page with the ring stain out of the diner and into the graduate's legs. He finally notices the advertisement and sees that the job doesn't require any previous work experience. The founder inexplicably jumps to his death just as the graduate enters the building to answer the job post. Back at the boardroom, the remaining members barely spend time to mourn the founder's death mere minutes ago and immediately jump into planning the corporation's future. The founder had no family or stated heir in his will, and so his controlling interest in the company's stock will be made available for the public to buy. The board members are horrified at this possibility, and so they make plans to plunge the company's stock downward so they can buy the controlling interest that the founder left behind. One conspiring businessman on the board takes things further by suggesting that they get an incompetent proxy to take over, so the stock would depreciate greatly. The graduate is immediately hired to be a mailroom clerk and is overwhelmed by the strict instructions he has to follow, or else his pay will be deducted. A blue letter arrives at the mailroom. It's a very important and confidential document to be sent to the top brass upstairs. The graduate's boss announces that the letter was written by the founder himself before his death. The boss gives him express instructions to deliver the letter to the businessman directly. The graduate rides an elevator and nervously approaches the businessman's office. Instead of handing him the letter, the graduate shows him a piece of paper with a circle drawn on it. He presents it as the newest invention that the corporation should produce. He then commits a series of blunders that ends with the first page of an important contract on fire, and the rest of the contract flying out the window the graduate accidentally breaks. The businessman tries to catch the flying pages, and he almost falls out of the window, but the graduate saves him. The businessman thinks he's simple-minded, and he gets the idea that the graduate would be the perfect proxy because he is naive and easily controlled. In a blink of an eye, he is installed as the new president of the corporation, and the stock immediately falls. An editor of a popular newspaper in the city is desperate to get an interesting story on the new president of the corporation. A female reporter and his team volunteers to expose the graduate as a fake. Still adjusting to his new position, the graduate pitches his circle idea again to the businessman. He insists that this product is easily manufactured and will be a hit in the growing middle class. The businessman, however, laughs it off and jokingly agrees to him pitching his idea to other members of the board. Later that day, the graduate meets the reporter in the same diner he went to on his first day in the city. She pretends to be a down-on-her-luck girl with financial problems, and he takes a liking to her. She also fakes a fainting spell, and he takes her to his office. He disappears into a restroom, and the reporter takes the opportunity to snoop through his desk. She doesn't find much, except an appointment with an Achievers Club for people from Indiana. She hurriedly goes back to the couch as he returns from the restroom. The reporter then pretends that she's also from Indiana, and the graduate is so delighted he gets her a job as his secretary on the spot. The reporter goes back to the newspaper and writes a scathing article about how the new president of the corporation is an imbecile. The next day, the graduate reads the story and is angry at how he is portrayed in the article. He asks his secretary, the undercover reporter, to write a response to the writer of the article. He even surmises that the writer must be ugly, since she does not want to show her picture next to her byline. Of course, he does not know that the writer he is disparaging is the secretary he had just hired. The reporter bristles at his words and struggles to contain her own anger against the graduate. That night, the reporter finds a secret tunnel that leads to the giant clock on top of the building. She meets the clock man, who's been keeping the clock running for years. He knows that she is an undercover reporter, and he reveals the board's plot to her. She hurries to submit the article exposing the board's treachery to her editor, but the editor doesn't believe her. Unless she gets the proof to back her claims, he will not print her story. The corporation's annual Christmas gala rolls around. The graduate gets cornered by two of the board members' wives, and they tease him about his attraction to the reporter. The businessman's wife even shares that she used to be a secretary for the businessman too, before they fell in love and got married. The businessman approaches them and rescues the graduate from the wives. He introduces him to the rest of the stockholders, hoping that they'll get to see up close and personal how the graduate is an imbecile. At one point, the graduate speaks a Finnish phrase he learned in high school and gets socked by the Finnish stockholder for offending them. The reporter finds the injured graduate in a room and applies ice on his wound. She tries to tell him the truth but never finds the right moment. The two share a passionate kiss. The graduate unveils a prototype of his circle idea. The board is confounded with this new device, but the businessman pushes to green-light the product so the stock could further tank. The product goes through various departments that refine, test, and price it before it officially hits the stores. The creators working for the corporation decide to officially call it a hula hoop. Initially, the sales don't look good for the hula hoop. Stores begin to reduce the price until eventually they just throw the products onto the street for free. Kids find the hula hoops and begin to play with them. Surprisingly, it becomes a popular children's toy, generating massive profits for the corporation. People begin to take the graduate more seriously due to the success of the hula hoop. Soon enough, adults begin to use it. The graduate even receives a congratulatory call from President Eisenhower. However, the pressure to come up with a bigger and better idea begins to catch up to the graduate. He becomes an arrogant ladies' man. The company's stock is worth more now than it ever was. But this is bad news for the board members, who had apparently dumped most of their shares when the graduate was first promoted, thinking they could eventually buy the stock at a cheaper price. Since the stock is now more expensive, they have weakened their positions in the company. The reporter angrily storms into the graduate's office to confront him about the corporation letting go of 80% of its workforce. She is also angry that the graduate hadn't spoken to her in a week. She berates him for being a spoiled and lazy man, and she resigns on the spot. Later, an elevator operator sneaks into the graduate's office and presents an idea for a flexible straw. However, the graduate deems it idiotic and fires him. Later that night, a janitor comes to the businessman with the information on the reporter's true identity. He hands the businessman a folder filled with the reporter's background, pictures, and previous article. The businessman meets with the graduate and tells him that the elevator operator he had fired is now claiming that the graduate stole the hula hoop idea from him. The businessman then also reveals that his former secretary is a reporter and she has written a shocking expose to bring the graduate down. He also adds that they tried to kill the story, but the newspaper is eager to publish the story. Because of his mistakes, the graduate will lose his position as president of the company. This is all according to the businessman and the board's plan to kick him out. However, back in the newspaper's offices, the reporter is fighting against the operator's claims being published on the front page tomorrow. It turns out that contrary to his story, the businessman had supplied the evidence to the newspaper in order to take the graduate down. The next day, a psychiatrist hired by the board diagnoses the graduate as mentally ill. The board decides that he will be taken to a psychiatric facility soon. The news of the graduate being taken to a sanitarium will surely plunge the stock downward, and the rest of the board members will be able to take back control of the company. Sad and alone, the graduate gets drunk in a bar. The reporter finds him there and apologizes for betraying him. But the graduate refuses to forgive her and leaves the bar. He runs into the elevator operator, who tells him that the businessman gave him his old job back and suggested that the graduate had stolen the hula hoop idea from him. The elevator operator punches him in the face, and an angry mob chases him through the city streets. He runs to the corporation's building and wears his old mailroom uniform. He climbs to the top floor and steps out to the ledge, intending to jump and end his life as the founder did. The graduate slips and manages to hold on to the ledge with one hand. The janitor steps out into the ledge, but just coldly looks as the graduate's grip slips and he starts to fall. However, the clockman stops the clock on top of the building and freezes time. Then the founder appears to the graduate as an angel. He asks the graduate why he didn't give the blue letter to the businessman on his first day, as that letter contains his dying wishes. The graduate apologizes for his mistake, and the founder reminds him that the letter is still in his uniform's pocket. He takes out the letter and reads it. In it, the founder wrote that he was a miserable man who chose riches instead of true love. Because of this, he never found happiness in his life. This is why he chose to commit suicide. He also wrote that he wants his successor to be someone who is not afraid to fail and learn, and that he thinks the businessman would be the successor. However, if the board chooses to elect someone else as president, he will be the one to inherit the founder's controlling interest. This is an ironic twist because if the businessman had just stayed quiet, he would have inherited everything anyway. But because he couldn't stop himself from meddling, the graduate is now the heir to the controlling interest. Finally, the founder reminded the businessman in the letter that his heir should never despair because he has given him a second chance to make things right. While all of this is happening, the janitor checks the clock's fuse box, wondering why the graduate hasn't fallen all the way down yet. The clockman faces the janitor and battles it out with him. However, the janitor manages to get the clock running again, and the graduate begins to fall. The clockman finally throws the janitor down the shaft, and the janitor's dentures get stuck in one of the clock's gears, stopping time once again, and preventing the graduate from falling to his death. He is now frozen 2 feet off the ground. Hovering above him, the founder tells the graduate to deliver his letter first thing in the morning. Then, the dentures break, and the clock starts running again, but the graduate just softly lands. With a raucous cheer, he gets up and runs back to the bar as fast as he can. He finds the despondent reporter there and makes up with her. The next morning, the graduate triumphantly delivers the founder's blue letter to a shocked board. The businessman can't believe what is happening and tries to jump from the building. The same psychiatrist he hired to diagnose the graduate comes to stop him and also diagnoses him with mental illness and locks him away in a sanatorium. The graduate becomes a true president of the corporation this time. He carries with him every day the lessons he learned from his own failures. He leads the company with compassion, wisdom, and a fervor to help people. The movie ends with him unveiling his next product, a frisbee. Just like his hula hoop, the graduate's frisbee is set to take the company to new heights. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.